We now move on to the world of cricket, and we have as speakers eminent cricketers Mr. Adam Gilchrist, Mr. Bishan Singh Bedi, and Mr. Peter Roebuck. To captain this session, ladies and gentlemen, I invite a spokesjournalist with immense experience and specialization in cricket, the deputy editor at India Today, Ms. Sharda Ugra. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gilchrist, Mr. Bedi, and Mr. Roebuck, captained by Sharda Ugra. Yes, please.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Welcome to a session that a few years ago would not have found its place in this gathering of leaders from government, industry, and culture. But as everyone in India will tell you, cricket has become a very serious business. In fact, the cynical suggest that all that cricket is these days is in fact a business. And the panel that's here, I'm sure, will have varying views on that. This session is titled, "Is Just Not Cricket," which in its way just compounds the irony. The phrase, "it's not cricket," as we know, refers to the game's traditional ethical code, which is expected to set the benchmark for the average man's conduct outside the game, outside the cricket field. Today, nobody expects that almost impossible standard from the game. Perish the thought. Matches now are policed by 4 umpires, a match referee, an anti-corruption officer, and more than a dozen cameras. Batsmen don't walk, with a few notable exceptions, and revelations of what is actually said on a cricket field during a contest cannot be reported in the newspapers without using an army of asterisks along with it. The game we watch and follow today is just not cricket as was known in an older sense. Everybody accepts that. But despite our expectations from the game changing, cricket still finds itself trapped by conflicts and contradictions. Rarely does a season go by without a flashpoint being reached. If it was Pakistan's refusal to take to the field at the Oval a couple of years ago, it was at the standoff in Sydney, as I'm sure all of us know about, very, very recently. Cricket is becoming an arena for polarization. For a sport played at the highest level by only a few countries, we certainly do have a lot of arguments. At some times during the recent India-Australia series, it seemed that there was less cricket and more argument. At a sporting level, that was a great pity. Australia versus India is the preeminent cricketing rivalry of the 21st century. It pits cricket's sporting powerhouse against its financial giant. The rivalry had produced high-quality, high-intensity cricket, with players on both sides being pushed to produce their very best. India versus Australia always had an edge since the fabulous 2001 series onwards, because the results of matches between them turned on very little. But in these last few months, you have to ask, has this rivalry actually been pushed over the edge? There have been allegations of racism, bullying, arrogance, arm-twisting, name-calling. And depending on whom you listened to or believed, you could blame it either on Harbhajan Singh or Andrew Simons, Steve Buckner or Mike Proctor, the BCCI or the ICC. About a quarter of a century ago, England, the old colonial power that had taken the game to all parts of its empire, was a natural adversary for newer nations trying to find their feet and establish their stature and assert their identity. That was as true for India as it was for Australia, West Indies. But today, cricket's frictions find new combinations and trouble can erupt anywhere. The India-Australia series provided a small and somewhat bitter taste of the tensions that are always at work underneath cricket. Old world versus new world, traditionalists versus modernizers, technology versus the human factor, East versus West, the ugly Australian versus the constantly whining Indians, us versus them. If the two leading countries in world cricket, one which has set enviable standards of excellence and the other which has the biggest appetite and resources for the sport, if they find it so difficult to compete without rancor, then cricket has a problem. Its temporary truce is a fragile one. This century will continue to ask tough questions of cricket and cricketers. Fissures in the game are only going to grow now with the advent of new formats. 2020 has been a massive success, bringing crowds back to domestic cricket in England, South Africa and Australia. But India typically has sought to make a blockbuster Bollywood production out of 2020. The Indian Premier League, which will be upon us in just about a month, is seen as a threat to not only the other formats of the games, tests and one-day internationals, but also to the essence of the sport, which actually pits country against country. But will this development of a club league actually threaten the game, or will it narrow the gaps between cultures? Will Ricky Ponting sharing a dressing room with Sourav Ganguly help India and understand each other better, or at least help Sourav Ganguly up his fielding standards? Is private ownership of teams a good thing? What happens to cricket's smaller struggling economies? Who in cricket has the astute business leader's ability to look into the future and anticipate what is to come? Who in the game can be its leader and its custodian? We have a very diverse and distinguished panel today to talk about what's happening in cricket, one of whom was right in the middle of the latest eruptions in Australia, one of whom reported and commented on them, and a third who watched it from a distance and will offer us his unique take on events. W.G. Grace, cricket's original superstar from the 19th century, once refused to leave the crease after being given out. He ticked off the umpire, who had declared him out, saying, "They've come to see me bat, not to see you umpire." Unlike that unfortunate umpire, I do realize that all of you have come not to watch me speak, but to listen to our eminent guests. And we are delighted to have them. So I'll just begin and introduce them quickly. In order of age, I think. Vishen Singh Bedi is former India captain and the Indian team's first cricket manager, whom we will remember for trying to introduce a culture of fitness into the team, and one of the greatest spinners from our country and that the game has ever known. Off the field, though, you will never get any spin, loop, or drift from him. He believes in straight shooting. He is an unapologetic traditionalist at heart, and his sobering views on 2020 and the euphoria that seems to follow the Indian team everywhere these days are worth listening to. He will also tell us whether during his playing days the phrase "it's just not cricket" meant anything more than the lament it is today. Former captain of Somerset, columnist and commentator, Peter Roebuck has been writing and discussing cricket for 2 decades now, and he has always been widely read and respected amongst players and hardcore fans. But he shot to instant fame all over India a few months ago when at the end of the ill-tempered Sydney Test match he demanded that Ricky Ponting be sacked. Before the Indians thought they had a loyal supporter in the Australian media, he made sure he let Indians know what he thought about their team's threats to go home midway through a tour. An independent thinker, he will tell it like it is. Adam Gilchrist is called cricket's greatest all-rounder after Sir Garfield Sobers, but he is more than just a very special talent. He is the rarest of the rare. A cricketer whose presence and career has actually changed the way his sport is played. Before he arrived, wicket-keepers were housekeepers. They kept things tidy behind the stumps and did what they could with the bat. But Adam Gilchrist transformed the gloveman into the dynamo of a cricket team, who could turn matches on their head by tackling crisis with thrilling counter-attack. He was a key member and a prime mover in Australia's dominance of the modern game, but he played his cricket in a distinctly old-fashioned way. It's a great privilege to have all of them here, and I now invite Peter Roebuck to begin proceedings.
Thank you very much, Sharda. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege and honour to be here today. I'm going to take you on a circular journey. I'm told that Indians like circular arguments. Some of you come from Delhi. I'm sure you spend a lot of your time going round in circles. And indeed, India Today's office is in Connaught Place. So I think I'm allowed to make a circular argument today. We're going to end up where we began. With the last over of the recent one-day series in Brisbane in Australia. Last over, you'll recall, was bowled by Irfan Pathan. The captain of India was Mahendra Dhoni. Dhoni went to Irfan Pathan, and we all thought, the last over, Australia 13 to win. He put his arm around him, and we all thought to ourselves, now he's buttering him up a little bit, giving him some confidence. Irfan's figures were about 5 overs, 0 for 93 or something at the time. Instead of which, Dhoni said to Irfan, "Irfan, you cannot possibly be so bad that you go for 13 runs in this over." Afterwards, a colleague of mine from India media asked Irfan what he was thinking at that time. And Irfan said, "I've seen my father trying to put food on the table and trying to get a partner for his daughter." We all know those are the two great things of Indian parenthood, eh? So, cricket pressure was nothing to him. What is cricket pressure beside that? The person who told me that comes from Bihar, quite eminent now in Indian television circles. The captain, as you know, comes from Ranchi. Irfan, with the background that he has. India has changed. That match and the Sydney Test match were an expression of contemporary India. India has become like Australia. These people come from the same place that Ponting comes from. Launceston. The back of Launceston, Mowbray. That's where the Australian cricketers have come from. They have been blue-collar working cricketers. What I saw an article today about Dhoni said he had a working ethic. That is where we end up on the journey we're taking today. Let us first acknowledge the different roles that cricket plays in our lives. In entertainment, we have one of the great entertainers here. In beauty, we have one of the beautiful bowlers of the game today, artistry. In competition, of course, we all love competition. But it also tells us something else about the culture of our nation. It is the Australian culture and against the Indian culture on the field. You see the news broadcast, there's the international news, there is the local news, there is the weather, there is the business, there is the sport. As if these things are not intermingling. Of course they're intermingling. Everything affects everything else. They all find an expression in you and they find an expression in me. Interested in all of those things. So when we talk about culture of India and the culture of Australia, it is not a false argument to say that these things find their expression on the cricket field. The reverse also applies. Indian cricket reflects Indian culture, tells us something about it. Indian culture tells us something about the Indian cricket team. What I'm going to suggest to you is the Australian cricket culture has remained almost the same for 100 and so years, since Federation in 1901. But that the Indian cricket culture has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. To come like the Australian culture. The reason is economic, political, and so forth. It's nothing to do with Dhoni, he is a product of it. Or Kumble, he is a product of it. It goes back in the historical journey to 1850 in England, where there were two great forces in the game, vying for the dominance of the game. Namely, professional cricketers and the upper classes. Now what happened was this. The professional cricketers realized they had some skill to sell. The lace makers and the so forth of Nottingham had said, we've got a skill to sell. So they became professionals. They travelled around on trains, playing against 20 of Bristol, 15 of Taunton, and so forth, selling themselves in professionals, getting paid, playing for money. Meanwhile, the other force of English cricket was the lords and the ladies, the lords more I'll say, at the private schools, taking charge of the game. So these were the two forces. The workers who wanted to be properly paid, in the same way that lace workers were properly paid. Their movement was called the Levellers movement, which had MPs in Parliament in the middle of the 19th century. And the lords taking charge, the headmasters, the vicars taking charge. What happened was, in cricket, unique to England, and uniquely to any other sport in England, the victory was taken by the lords, by the upper classes who ran the game. This had a very significant effect on the game. The game became, therefore, a means of instilling values in its players. That's what the game became. Because these players had to go there and over there and over there to instill the same values in the nation. This was what they thought their duty was. So, cricket became something, the phrase "it's not cricket" did not arise by accident. You don't hear it's not soccer. You don't hear it's not tennis. You don't hear it's not golf. You don't hear it's not rugby. You hear it's not cricket. Why? Because cricket uniquely was run by the upper classes. It became a popular upper class game. Now, this had an immense effect on the history of the game in the colonies. Almost without exception, the colonies accepted that upper class British principle and played by that code. Because when you went to India, or when you went to Sri Lanka, or when you went to Pakistan, you took these things with you, and you instilled them because you believed in them. 20 years ago, Sri Lankan players were still asking for, in test matches, were saying, "Please, sir, give me centre." Australian players have never said that. So, there was that great tradition that went through. In all the countries except one, the one being Australia. Australia never accepted that English starting point, that the game was a way of instilling values. To the Australians, the game was there to win or lose. You abided by the umpire's decision. You played by the rules of the game and to the edge of the rules of the game. It was about that. It wasn't about anything more than that. The noble idea of the game was not deeply rooted in Australia. Why? Because Australia, there was no culture to put into Australia, only to create. They could make whatever culture they wanted to make, and they did, and they have. A very egalitarian culture. Cricket has been played by everyone in that same hard, straightforward, unromantic, unsentimental way since Federation and probably before. You can see how it's played. In India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka and the West Indies, where the players would come from the cane fields and conduct themselves like great gentlemen, from the sugarcane fields of Guyana and Trinidad and conduct themselves like great gentlemen, they rose up to this code, the code of the settler, the code of the colonist. India got its independence, you hardly need me to tell you when. Subsequent to that, we've had generations and various movements within India. The first major change was Gavaskar in the 1970s, as it was with Imran in Pakistan, as it was later with Ranatunga in Sri Lanka. Gavaskar was the voice of protest. We're not going to do it that way anymore. We're going to do it the Indian way. You may think he overplayed his hand, but that was his message, a very clear message. The next stage was the stage of Tendulkar, where Tendulkar is saying, I am comfortable. Indian, West, North, South, what are all these things to me? He's a great player and a great sportsman of the game, but he is now comfortable with himself. He's just going along being a great player. What the Sydney Test match was about was the third, and I would suggest final stage, of this development of culture. The third and final stage is Dhoni, Framaranch, and Pathan, and Ishant, and such people. And this wrestler you've come up with who bowled everyone out. And this little moon-faced leg spinner who bowled everyone out. Pakistan used to find these people, not India. Now they're all over the place. Where are they coming from? The villages, the outstations, because there's a good organization in place to find them. So, what happened in Sydney, away from a turbaned off-spinner whose name I'm trying very hard not to mention, and who a turbaned left-arm spinner has told me he has no intention of imitating today. What happened there was an expression of that democratic, Indian, confident, passionate, committed, fearless self. It was a sense of Indian true independence of mind, independence of economy. It was not a protest thing. It was not a thing whereby you say, yes, everything is fine. It was, we're fearless now. Why should we be scared of anything? I watched my father trying to put food on the table. So, what we have now in this world game is two forces, basically, who are rivals but also partners. They don't know it yet, but they talk the same language. They come from the same places. I regard this as a great step forwards in the game. Do you know, it was 2 months ago, everyone was blaming cricket. We can't get the game on the back pages. I write one article, we can't get it off the front pages. And everyone's blaming me. I say, no, it was just something that was needed to be expressed for people to understand a much broader picture. The challenge India faces now, it's not enough to come up against Australia and beat them once in a blue moon, or even quite often. To sustain success requires a strong cricketing culture. It means that when you win the T20, you don't get in a delirious state. You celebrate for a day and you move on because you want to win the next thing now. You expect to win. You don't just hope to win and go wild when you win. Confident nations don't do that. And this now is a confident nation. Dhoni, at the end of that game in Brisbane, stood there quietly watching. He knew 3 bad balls and the game was the other way. He didn't get as carried away. There he is now in Ranchi on his Harley Davidson running around the place. So, but look at Ishant now. Ishant is your challenge in Indian cricket now. Ishant had to move out of his home the other day, and he was in tears, because people are coming knocking on the door. This is not a nation yet that expects to succeed, but its cricket team is telling you success in this country should be expected and not a surprise. Cricket is saying that, your economy is saying that, your politics is saying that, your hockey team is not saying that yet. We're not here to discuss that. So, when we say it's not cricket, okay, things did happen in that particular moment, but I think there are far more significant movements taking place here that are more interesting than some little fracas that broke out in Sydney, where we all got a little bit carried away, myself included. So that is what I really want to contribute at the start of this session today, to say that this is a healthy conflict, that Australia and India need and deserve each other, and that cricket will be enhanced, and that what we have seen now is India becoming Australia, and neither of them really liking each other all that much, But in the end, the egalitarian side, the economic spreading side, the sense of justice in both countries will bind them together. Then it'll be for the others to catch up. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. As a journalist, all of us envy Peter's ability to say something extremely profound and wise in a few words, in a few sentences. That was a terrific journey through, history, and it put into place all the angst that Indians feel when they go up against someone. And he's come up with a surprising premise that Indians and Australians are actually very alike. There was a bit of a debate as to who would go next. That we decided to settle it on batting order. And by no stretch of imagination would Bedi Saab come before Adam Gilchrist. So please welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's our great pleasure, Adam Gilchrist.
Thank you very much, Sharda. And ladies and gentlemen, like Peter said, it's a real honour and a thrill to be asked to come along and attend such a prestigious gathering here in India, and specifically here in Delhi. It's also nice to be back in India, a place where I can finally get recognised. And I'll very quickly tell you why I say that. I was recently in an airport in Adelaide, in my home country, and obviously not quite as passionate in Australia about cricket as they are here in India, but we do get stared at. We do have people come up and approach us for autographs and photos, and on this particular day I was tired. I needed my own space. I didn't need to be interrupted, and I felt some eyes on me, a set of eyes, and a gentleman, and he kept in my space, and finally he came up to me, and he was annoying me by this stage, I must admit. And finally he came up, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned to him a bit annoyed about being interrupted in my time, and he said with a very excited expression, "Aren't you Glenn McGrath?" At which point I should do nothing but laugh at myself and my own ignorance and arrogance, probably. I said no, thinking he would then realise his mistake, that I was one of Glenn's teammates, and he just shook his head and walked away. It's also nice, a bit daunting to be here in India today, the 15th of March. We all know, I'm sure you've all read the famous Shakespearean play, The Ides of March, Julius Caesar was told to be. Be aware of it. Bad things could happen. Tragic events will take place. Well, I have history on the Ides of March. It was 7 years ago today where I stood, and I'll show you a little image here. I stood in the middle of Eden Gardens. Today, 7 years ago, was the day that India stopped our 16-run consecutive win in Test cricket. That there is a picture of me getting my second first ball duck of a game. Out first ball twice in a match. I'm the only Australian ever to do it in Test match history. That's Sachin Tendulkar bowling, and my mindset as he ran in was, whatever you do, don't sweep. Don't play a sweep shot. He bowled it up, I played a sweep shot, and I was out first ball again. So that's my history of the Ides of March. So I'm a bit nervous being back here on this date. But I guess moving to the topic, it's just not cricket. I must admit, walking off that day, I wondered what cricket was. Going from 100 in Mumbai, the game before, one of the great highlights of my career, to the reality check of coming back down to facing two balls and getting out to both of them. I'd like to just acknowledge a few current issues that seem to be around, and I guess a bit like Peter's topic or theme, and I guess the feeling I got from that talk there was a positive feeling. I too am taking a more positive approach. Without disrespecting these issues, obviously 2020 and the IPL, what effect is that going to have on world cricket? Umpiring and technology, that's been well and truly spoken about and highlighted. Do we need a greater use of technology? Player behaviour, player standards, behavioural standards on and off the field, sledging, the recent Sydney Test match, and basically the recent whole Australian summer. The money coming into the game, the professionalism, what effect is that going to have on the game? Transnation rivalries, cultures, interlocking, East versus West, is there a divide? And I think the most serious and perhaps controversial issue in cricket, and certainly in the music industry here in India, is will the singing career of Asha Bhosle be resurrected after sharing a song with Brett Lee? I think that is a very big issue that needs to be sorted out. It's a tough one for her to come back from, I think. As long as cricket is played, these issues are going to be around, I feel. I classify them as day-to-day, game-to-game, series-to-series issues that will crop up. It's been going on for a long time. I cast my mind back 20 to 30 years, and it was amazing, well, with great similarity, an amazing similarity, that I realised that some of these issues have been well and truly around, very similar to what we have today. Umpiring decisions have always been debated. There was a great debate, should we have any use of technology? And of course, you know, it's not much less than 20 years ago that we introduced technology into the game, and now we're debating, should we have even an increased level? Sledging has been around. Verbal altercations has been around in cricket as long as it's been going on, be it in jest, light-hearted or very aggressive. It's been there, and I'm sure it will continue to be. Player payments, that's definitely been a big issue in history, where players thought, perceived that there was more money being made out of this game than what was actually coming back to them as the entertainers or the ones providing the product. There was a great fear, no doubt about it, that one-day cricket, when it arrived, was going to cannibalise Test cricket. It was going to eat it up and push it, if not into the background, even see the death of Test cricket. These are day-to-day, series-to-series, year-to-year issues. I think on reflection of those issues, 2020, one-day cricket 20 years ago, it hasn't eaten up the game. I think 2020 is going to enhance the game. It has the potential, if used wisely and well administered, to enhance cricket at all levels. And it's a vital tool. We think to somewhere like the West Indies, there's an opportunity for T20 cricket to help give financial buoyancy to the West Indies Cricket Board, that then allows them to utilise resource and gives them the funds to make sure that Test cricket survives. I guess looking at those issues, I see those as trees. We hear the saying about, often, certainly in Australia we say it a lot, you can't see the trees from the forest. All you can see is a big picture. You can't specify individual things. Well, I'm looking at those as trees, and I want to look at the forest, the bigger picture that is world cricket. And I guess I'll even focus a little bit on India here. Look at the changes in that time frame that's happened in India, not just Indian cricket. Look at the economy. India was a closed economy, and wow, look at it now. Watch it go. Who would have heard of a mobile phone 20, 30 years ago? I believe, I was recently told, 750 million handsets in India. Amazing strides forward in short space of time. In a cricket sense, the Australian tours of India, thinking back to exactly what years they were, but I certainly know that the Australian tours of India just weren't televised back into Australia. My memory, or the only sort of images we have, are grainy images of the Madras famous Tide Test. Very grainy images of Dean Jones leaning over, physically being sick through dehydration on his way to 200. And I saw a grainy image of what looked to me like a reasonably dodgy LBW decision to finish that game off. I can sympathise with the Indians on that last decision. Who knows? We may never have had that Tide Test, but for, as I say, what I thought was a little bit of a shonky LBW to Greg Matthews. And on that, no cricket coverage of tours to India as early as back as 86. By 2001, the tour that we had over here, that tour that I made reference to, that was the highest rating TV program on cable or satellite TV ever in history, that series. So they're the strides that the interest in India and the way cricket has moved forward and the way Indian cricket is capturing the world. The Border Gavaskar Trophy, in my opinion, is now truly the highest profile Test match series. It's the one that I myself, in 12 years of international cricket, found the greatest struggles against India, found the greatest sense of relief, sense of achievement in victory against India. They were the hardest battles, they were the toughest battles. And I think that's indicative of the way Australians and Australian cricket teams look towards India now. And I'll just show you an image here how I'll represent that. This picture here is, if that can come up there, Perry, thanks. Thinking back to 2001, again that series in Mumbai. We played the first test in Mumbai, and that image there is me scoring 100 in that test in Mumbai. I didn't bring this up just to stand up and tell you what a great cricketer I am. It has relevance to what I'm about to say. The expression there is one of satisfaction. That's 100. That was my 16th test match. It was my second test match 100. We hadn't lost a game up till that point. Cricket life for me in test cricket was going really well. Pretty cruisy. Everything was good. So that's 100 in Mumbai in 2001. I look pretty happy there. That is an image of me scoring 100 in 2004 against India in Bangalore. In 3 years, and realising what the challenges that we faced whenever we played India, both home and away, that's where it got to, where I scored 100. And far from being content and happy, that was one of the great achievements of my career. That was a tour that I was able and fortunate to captain. But that moment, compared to the other image of when I'd scored the 100 3 years before, showed the way I think the psyche of the Australian team and players, and certainly me as an individual, changed. And that was a huge thrill. Not taking anything away from the Mumbai 100, but that to me was one of the great days of my career. With that great rivalry, we're always going to get a lot of desire. We're going to get sparks flying, as Peter mentioned. We're going to have cultures clashing. We're going to have a lot of energy going into, young players representing their country, trying to win. Again, Peter mentioned the varying cultures. Once they collide with great intent, there's going to be sparks flying, and so there should be. I think in an ironic kind of way, sledging and verbal jousting, I think they're quite a compliment to your opponent. It's an acknowledgement that you fear them. It's an acknowledgement that you feel threatened by the challenge that they pose. It's a weird kind of way to do it, but you're almost showing each other respect. In the intense contest that is Test match cricket, there are no saints. I had a off-spinning friend from Punjab region who recently made reference that I am no saint on the cricket field. And believe me, I'm not. I've never proclaimed to be one. And there shouldn't be any saints out there. It's hard fought. There's a lot of passion, there's a lot of desire, and it's an emotional game. Yes, there's no doubt there's a responsibility for players to know not to cross the line, as we like to say. But I too think there's a great responsibility for administrators and even the press to make sure that they don't try to over-regulate natural behaviour and try to push away the emotion from cricket that we see on the cricket field.